morning, everybody. My name is Ben Eady. I'm the online media manager for ModernAnalyst.com, the premier online community for business analysts. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar titled The Knowledge Explosion, How to Crank Up Your Productivity and Be a Dynamite Leader. Today's featured speaker is Kim Carlson and Heidi Ferris from Bloomfire. The webinar will last approximately 60 minutes, including the Q&A session, so make sure to submit your questions in advance using the questions feature on the webinar software. I'd also like to say thank you to Bloomfire for sponsoring this event, and at this time, I'll turn it over to Kim and Heidi to get us started.
Thank you, Ben. On behalf of Heidi and myself, we would like to thank Modern Analysts for inviting us to talk about the knowledge explosion. My name, as Ben said, is Kim Carlson, and as a Bloomfire ambassador, my focus is helping organizations launch and adopt their own knowledge sharing application. In my past experience in corporate education and e-learning, I've seen trends in the training and education realm, and the one thing that still remains is trying to capture all the knowledge that is out there and get it into the hands of people who really need it. The knowledge explosion is real, it's big, and harnessing its power can make a difference in your organization's productivity. Joining me today is Heidi Ferris.
Thanks, Kim. Good morning, everyone. As Kim mentioned, my name is Heidi Ferris. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Bloomfire. And my experience as it pertains to this presentation is around tying learning moments to business objectives within the organization and ultimately how to be and produce dynamite leaders.
Now, no one is asking you to turn your company into a hippie commune, but the fact is, even your most senior executives can learn something from a new hire. Today we're going to take a look at how knowledge sharing without boundaries will drive better results, increase sales, reduce costs, improve efficiencies, and create leaders across your organization. Now, creating a knowledge sharing culture within your organization where individual contributions and peer-to-peer mentoring is rewarded will result in higher employee engagement, increased productivity, and create dynamic leaders. These benefits will directly impact your bottom line according to the National Business Research Institute. And that being said, let's take a look at the workplace landscape and some of the issues that might be keeping you from succeeding.
So the workforce landscape right now is really interesting because it's comprised of three very different generations. You have the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, and the Gen Yers. The baby boomers, the largest generation the world has seen, is reaching retirement age. All of these folks have seen their careers transition from pen and ink to the digital age. They're adept at working from stored knowledge, which often gives them a sense of job security. They feel like if they share the knowledge that they have with everyone, they become less valuable to the organization in some way. Then you have the Gen Xers. A significantly smaller portion of the workforce they're moving up the ladder and into leadership positions, bringing their education and diversity with them. They're individualistic, flexible, and technologically adept. They've been trained under the baby boomers, but they've worked really hard to transition their lines of work to fit their own needs. And then, of course, you have the Gen Yers. Gen Ys entering the workforce and bringing their work to live and not live to work attitudes about work-life balance with them. They challenge the status quo in their careers and ask more why questions than either of their generational predecessors. Many people look at Gen Y as lazy and spoiled, but the reality is that these workers are redefining how people connect. And while young, the leadership potential here is obviously ripe with fresh ideas and recent education. We experienced this at Bloomfire. Our CFO is a typical baby boomer. He likes to print stuff. He wants hard copies of expense reports, etc. But we're a startup, so we have a lot of Gen Y folks that work with us, especially in marketing and engineering. And printing out an expense report when there are tools like Expensify out there just seems ridiculous to these Gen Yers. What it really comes down to is figuring out how to create a culture and implement supporting tools that appeal to both sides of this equation. Kim's going to talk you through a few ways you can accomplish closing that generational gap to get better results within your teams.
Yeah, so how do we solve this problem and increase productivity for your business? If we embrace these generational differences across our workforce, we will soon see better results. After all, learning isn't just happening from the top down anymore. If you don't set up a structure of learning from all levels, you aren't tapping your most important resource, your people. So take a look at it this way. In 1986, 75% of the knowledge that a worker needed was stored in their heads. By 2006, that number was estimated to be 9%. This information comes to us from Jay Cross, chair of the Internet Time Alliance in Berkeley. He also goes on to write that the needed information is no longer in the worker's mind, but it's quote-unquote out there in the minds of others. This all leads us back to the fact that you learn what you need to do on your job. Excuse me, let me say that again. This all leads back that you learn what you need to do your job on the job, and you also learn informally from others. So how do we nurture this? We do this by creating a two-way communication dialogue that informs both ends of your chain of command. This allows people to take learning moments from each other and also apply them to all ends of the business.
Yeah, so Kim's absolutely right. Opening communication up and down the chain of command is obviously important for ongoing employee engagement, but it's also key when your team experiences turnover. According to recent studies, the average depth of a team is now only about 5 or 6 years old. Retaining the knowledge that you've spent time helping to cultivate will help you prevent reinventing the wheel when a veteran employee leaves your company. And one way to do this is to create a virtual knowledge sharing culture within your team from the get-go. Use a knowledge base or some kind of technology that helps you capture learnings in real time so that new employees or veteran employees who are learning something new can benefit from the experiences of their predecessors, which ultimately helps you get better results. So, playing off of getting better results with your team, how do you turn that specifically into increased sales? So something interesting is that 80% of workplace learning is informal. By informal, I mean this learning takes place through interactions and shared relationships. It's what happens in the hallways, at people's desks, and through conversations, not in a classroom or a training meeting or a development class. Coming from informal learning is what we call tribal knowledge. And tribal knowledge is maybe your organization's most untapped resource. Tribal knowledge is the information known within a group or tribe, but often unknown outside of it. It's sort of a collective wisdom of unwritten information known within a group. And what's interesting is most tribal knowledge actually comes from informal learning, making it that much more important to figure out how to support informal learning moments and unlock that tribal knowledge from the brains of your employees. For example, what is the true knowledge of sales? What do you really need to know to sell more? Is it found in a product spec sheet or a case study or a feature list? Or is it really a learned experience, such as which feature do I highlight first in a product demo? What's that wow moment? Those types of pieces of tribal knowledge are the ones that the baby boomers are hoarding. The Gen Xers are trying to figure out, and Gen Yers are really equipped to share that if they had it. Each moment saved from searching out information or people to answer questions is another moment spent on processing applicable data and selling more intelligently.
Yeah, Heidi, and that was never more true at a company where I used to work at. I used to work at Life Size Communications, which is a division of Logitech, and I feel very fortunate to have launched a knowledge sharing tool at that company. We had a void in our Salesforce, and our knowledge sharing application filled that void. Here's one of our success stories. A salesperson in California needed help preparing for a presentation. He had just received a call from a potential customer, and the customer said there was a change in plans for the meeting. The customer now wanted a detailed comparison of our new Video Center product, but he also wanted the comparison to our competitor's new Video Center product. Now, at the time, the competitor's product was just as new as ours, so there really wasn't any real competitive documents out there yet. Luckily, our culture encouraged asking and searching for knowledge using our knowledge sharing app. So a salesperson in California posted the question to the app, and it just so happened that a salesperson in Europe had just done a presentation earlier in the day and did the very same comparison on the two products, and basically it was what that potential customer wanted to see. So not only did the salesperson in Europe answer the question of the salesperson in California, he posted the slides and the notes for how to position our company in this comparison. Not only that, he gave his phone number so that the person in California could actually call him and they could basically have a mentoring session on how to position and use his slides. This was absolutely priceless information that his team member needed to use in California. And you may be asking, what happened in the end? Turns out that this solidified the deal. So in this example, we truly witnessed getting the information that people have into the minds of the people that need it, whenever they need it, wherever they need it. This saved the salesperson precious time because he had a go-to resource for the information he needed. Now, these two people who ordinarily wouldn't cross each other's path in the office during the day, now they had the opportunity to connect and were able to share information and be mentored. So you might ask, why didn't the salesperson just send an email? Well, can't you get the same result that way? Well, to be honest, how many of us have lost information in our email box? We have so many emails that we see every single day. However, most importantly at LifeSize, our sales teams were not on the same email distribution list at LifeSize. Therefore, the European salesperson would never have seen the email from the U.S. sales team member. There are a multitude of ways to share. However, none of them have been efficient in the past. And as everyone knows, when you're wasting time searching for information you need, you're wasting money. And as a matter of fact, according to a recent IDC report, employees spend about an average of 9 hours of work per week searching for information. At an average of $50,000 a year in annual salary, that's an average of about $11,250 per year per employee. A more recent report from McKinsey & Company in March of this year reveals that the average worker spends 28% of the work week managing email and nearly 20% looking for internal information or tracking down colleagues who could help them with specific tasks. Now that's 48% total and equals nearly half of your work week. With the same $50,000 example, this is about $24,000 a year. I don't know about you, but I've experienced this in my own work. I mean, how many times have I actually tried to search for something in my inbox? If I don't actually remember the person who sent me the email, or if I don't remember the date in which it was sent, pretty much good luck trying to find it. I end up searching my inbox, my sent box, my outbox, all my folders, only to realize when I actually found the information that my deadline had passed. Installing a knowledge-sharing hub that houses everything in one place will eliminate searching through emails or your content database or your video housing, etc. So a one-stop shop with advanced searching is an optimal place.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that, if you do evaluate technology to support your knowledge sharing efforts, focus on the end user experience as much as the management capabilities of the system. One of the hardest things within an organization is to get people to adopt new technology and actually use it. A lot of times today, what people will hack together for their knowledge sharing, so to speak, solution is a SharePoint instance with an intranet and email, and then people are going to 3 different places to find crucial information, and that can lead to errors, first of all, but more importantly on day-to-day, it slows you down, makes you less agile, and slows down decision-making processes, which actually costs your organization money. I actually experienced this myself, and my last place of employment, we had a homegrown SharePoint intranet sort of project management piece of software, and like I said, it was just hacked together by a project manager who needed to get a job done, and it wasn't user-friendly because it wasn't designed by a user experience expert. And ultimately, what happened was no one wanted to use it, which led people to working around processes. We lost a lot of money doing it this way, and even though there would have been some upfront investment, we could have really reduced costs significantly over time if we would have just implemented the right solution from the beginning.
Now let's take a look at a classic example of what currently happens in the workplace. You hire someone, you've got your new hire, you make them sit in a training class, usually with outdated materials, and someone in the front of the classroom who doesn't really do the job that they are teaching you how to do. After the class, you take your best person off his or her duties to help mentor the new hire and show them the ropes. But the person you took off their duties is too busy trying to accomplish their own job at the same time that they really don't have a lot of time to mentor the new hire. And eventually the new hire is left with menial tasks to do only to fill the allotted time that they have with this person. Then guess what? After virtually no quality training, you send the new hire off to do the job. And then later on you wonder, now why am I having to answer all these questions over and over again? And it's because when this person learned the information, it wasn't applicable and exercisable, therefore they didn't retain it. This is where organizations can improve. Because let's face it, we all know where the real learning happens, informally and through one another. The trick is knowing how to capture and streamline the informal learning process. Now we can do this by establishing a place for learning. We also need to help workers learn to improve how they learn. And we do this by developing a process for them to improve and incorporate learning in their culture. Also, creating a supportive learning culture so that people can learn from one another will also improve your workforce. Now, people learn differently, whether it's a preference of a generation or it's just been the old way of doing things. A formal classroom just isn't as effective anymore. However, a formal classroom training combined with informal learning tools or applications as a follow-up, that will give your organization a more effective way to learn. And not only is it effective, your people will have the information they need when they need it, and they won't have to wait until the next classroom or training session. So when seeking out informal learning, make sure to arm your team with a means to share effective techniques among themselves. Keep in mind that over 90% of organizations consider mobile enablement a priority. So therefore, you should too. And I'll say it once again, giving your team the information they need when they need it, where they need it, is most important.
Yeah, absolutely, Kim. Thinking about what Kim just said, you should implement technology that reduces communication churn and repeated questions. Those FAQs on websites, they exist there for a reason, and it's because an organization has been asked over and over again the same questions, and over time they came up with a collection of questions and answers that if they just put out there for everyone to, kind of retrieve their own answers, it saves them a lot of overhead. We should think about this for our internal customers as much as we think about it for our external customers, because it really is a time saver. Going back to that mixed bag of workers that we were talking about, baby boomers tend to hold on to those 8 to 5 hours. Well, Gen Y is more likely to, work kind of non-traditional hours. They roll in late, they stay late, and, what makes this a challenge is getting them face-to-face communication with one another. Make sure that your team has tools that allow them to ask questions and get answers regardless of time or location. Mobile is one way to do this, especially for Gen Y. This is, for them, they live on their phones. And this will help you improve your efficiencies in a big way if you can figure out how to adapt the way your people actually learn and work.
So now we're going to take a look at how we create dynamic leaders. The first step to creating a dynamic leader, basically at any level in your organization, is to motivate employees. And when I say motivate, I don't just mean paying them top dollar. 78% of surveyed employees cite recognition as being the top motivator. And this isn't just isolated to being recognized in the employee-employer relationship. Recognizing your team members' contributions in a public or a social setting can really reap the most powerful rewards. I mean, after all, look at how we recognize each other socially. On Facebook, we're liking posts. On Google, we're adding pluses. We share URLs that interest us or that we find that someone else might also find interesting. And we're also pretty pumped, or at least I am, when my tweets get retweeted by people I don't even know. It's quite the accomplishment when we start feeling the recognition of friends, family, and followers. And basically, it's the same thing with our employers. Not only is recognition important in creating dynamic leaders, so is employee engagement. 64% more employees are willing to advocate for their company if they are engaged. Not only that, but employees also report that they feel happy at work, and they also feel that they are highly innovative. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, productivity loss, basically due to employee disengagement, is estimated to be about $370 billion annually. So, how do you get employees engaged enough to stand up and lead? Basically, you establish a culture that respects and honors its contributors, and basically you will empower each member to lead individually. Employee engagement is also, it's more than just a one-way street. If you give, and hope that your employee stays, you end up with a workforce full of takers. There needs to be a common goal of making each other better, and knowing that in the end, the result is that you both succeed. And the way you do this is by recognizing your contributors, understanding everyone has something to share, and definitely encourage sharing from new and old alike. I will also say that having a culture of sharing isn't enough. It's imperative that you equip your people with a place to share, where that knowledge is recorded, it's easily searchable, and maintained for future generations of your workforce.
Yeah, so what Kim said is really interesting, which is, you need a place to store all this information so people can just share what they know. The trick is, how do you actually help, connect people who know stuff with those who need to know it? How do you get them to actually share that information that they hold so closely to their chest, because it makes them feel like, if I have all of this knowledge, then I'm important, and if I give it all away, I become less important in some way. It really comes back to this theme about creating a culture of trust. Being a top-down leader can stifle creativity and open communication and that two-way communication up and down the chain of command. The best ideas that have come from any projects I've worked on have come from a group or a person in a brainstorming session. Unfortunately, we tend to isolate brainstorming to sessions rather than making that part of a day-to-day culture. Encourage your team to share their thoughts and be supportive of them when they do. You'll not only create leaders within your team, but you'll also avoid being that boss that everyone quits. Studies show that 75% of people who voluntarily leave their jobs have quit their bosses, not their companies. Kim and I would like to thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you've gained something from our presentation. We know this group is very data-oriented, so we've included links to all of the reports that we mentioned all this data in today, which will be provided to you. And at this time, we'd like to open it up to Q&A if anyone has any questions.
Hi, this is Jenny. I've actually got the questions. Before we go to content questions, there have been a couple of questions about if we're going to have this webinar available. We absolutely are going to follow up. You're going to have full access to all the slides, including the citation slide here, so you can follow up on the research. And then we actually have a couple of content questions. Oh, Tim, I just accidentally hit the delete button on your first question. But it was about, it's great that there's a place for it, and correct me if I'm wrong in the question window. It's great that there's a place for this information to go, but what about the actual learnings that come from the information? How do you work that into the process?
So I think what's important is to, first figure out what themes are being asked over and over again. And you know, that's a challenge if you're using things like email, because you don't know, you know, which themes are coming up over and over and over again. So that's why it's important to have a place where you house all that information and have some kind of analytics on the back end that then can tell you, you know, gee whiz, you know, 80% of the people who we start as a new employee here ask the same question over and over again, and we could improve efficiencies dramatically if we had that information readily available. And, you know, that's, like I said, that's what ties it all back to having a central hub that has some kind of data on the back end, because then you can literally, especially if there's tagging and things like that, keywords that tag each post in your learning, you know, in your learning community, because then you can start to tag efficiencies with the number of times a certain question is asked, or the number of times a certain keyword comes up.
Okay, Tim also actually wants to offer, and maybe this actually goes back a little bit to culture, and you can talk around that, but being efficient at searching for information is admirable. Having the capability of knowing what to do with it is another story. That has to be learned. That learning needs to become part of the package. So that kind of goes back to culture and making sure that having those learning moments available all the time from the start is definitely a part of the root of your culture.
Absolutely. And the whole knowledge explosion that we're talking about, you know, what we've come across is it's a lot of change management within organizations, which, you know, having the tool is great, which is, you know, what we've said, but actually getting people to share is the challenge, and it does all come back to that trusting culture and being able to create that within an organization.
Okay. And then James had a question. How is a knowledge sharing tool different from a knowledge base?
Sure. Well, a knowledge base, if you look at it, is still a top-down. So you still have one person that's adding all that knowledge to the knowledge base. So acting more as an FAQ, this is what one person has identified everybody needs to know. So with a knowledge sharing application, there's more of a two-way communication going on, where you are recognizing someone, where you are empowering members to take the lead. So you can also develop conversations around that. Also with the knowledge sharing, as to tag on what Heidi was saying, was that, you know, you've also got those analytics on the back end, which you can actually improve and adjust, where as just a knowledge base, again, it's one person saying this is the information that everybody needs to know, where knowledge sharing is this is the information I want to hear, and I'm going to get it when I need it, wherever I need it.
Okay, and Tim actually wants to also offer, and we can talk about this, what also needs to be addressed is younger people's ability to coherently write and speak. If you can't express yourself well, no tool will enable you to do your job effectively.
That's actually a really good point, because I actually have a teenager who texts me and I can rarely understand or decipher what he's trying to say to me. But you know, a lot of knowledge sharing tools have other, you know, other tools built into them, like screencaster tools or webcam videos, where if someone, you know, isn't as adept at writing, maybe they're a better speaker, or maybe they would rather just show someone how to do something. There are tools out there that actually innately have a screencaster tool built in where you can record your screen and talk to the points that you're trying to get across, or just do a webcam video to ask a question or to give an answer. And also, you know, just the ability to share content in general instead of having to invent the wheel as you're doing it, being able to share presentations, spreadsheets, all of that.
And people glean information differently, so not everybody is going to want to read something. Most people in the younger generations these days, they'd rather go and watch a video. So maybe searching out those tools for your application might benefit you.
And then we also have a question from Lenore. How does a knowledge sharing application, an example Bloomfire, compare with enterprise content managers like SharePoint?
So Bloomfire taps into the social side of learning more so than, I would say personally, than a SharePoint instance. SharePoint is still First of all, it's very IT-centric, so it's not always the easiest thing to use. A lot of times people have to go and ask, how do I do this or how do I do that? And I think one of the key takeaways is that, if you have something that's super simple to use, people will A, more likely adopt it, and B, find ways to use it that is more beneficial to them. SharePoint is more of a just, I'm going to share a document or I'm going to create a document, and then it's just a document with a file name. Using Bloomfire as an example is we put context around that content and allow you to make multimedia posts if there is a better way to explain the information. But most importantly, we think that Bloomfire is super, super easy to use, and that anyone from the baby boomers all the way to the Gen Yers can grasp it really quickly and use it.
And actually, just as a follow-up, my role at Bloomfire as the ambassador is to help people adopt across their organization. And my conversations aren't about how to implement our tool. It is innate for people. They can easily understand how to use it. The conversations are just more about exploring strategies for how to organize, strategies for how to adopt across the organization. So it's never a how-to conversation. We never have to get somebody out there installing a product.
And we have another question from Ping. Can you provide specifics on how to develop a knowledge-sharing culture? How do you get people to share their knowledge?
Yeah, so I think something that's really popular right now is this whole idea of gamification. And we're actually working on some of this on the product right now, implementing some of these kinds of tools where, someone, for example, Facebook is the best example of just a straight up social network where people like things that you post or they can comment on things that you post, and that immediate feedback loop of I posted something and someone likes this, that there's some gratification about that. Just in general, people feel good about sharing things out there in the world, and there are ways to make people feel good about sharing things within an organization too. And again, I fall back to the whole culture of, everyone being open to new ideas and being able to reciprocate, gratitude when something of value is shared within the team.
Okay. And then I think, unless someone asks another question while we're wrapping up here, our final question is from Hannah. What happens when you have someone who is a bad apple, meaning they share things that kill morale?
Yeah, and again, going back to that whole theme of culture, letting people know from the very beginning that we're open, and the whole fifth grade kind of idea that your fifth grade teacher told you was there's no stupid questions. I mean, that kind of has to be part of your culture so that people aren't scared of sharing their information, scared of being I don't know if ridiculed may be a little extreme, but scared of what kind of response they're going to get when they share something. The other half of that is if you have someone within your organization who just shares things or comments negatively all the time, there are features within social applications and Bloomfire specifically for moderation. Where someone can moderate any answers or comments before they're actually published to the community at large.
That's actually all of our questions.
Great.
Thank you, Kim and Heidi, for a very informative presentation, and thank you to everyone for attending today's Modern Analyst webinar. I wanted to point out that the webinar, along with slides, will be archived at ModernAnalyst.com within a few days. This concludes today's event, and we hope you have a great day.